In this episode, I saw werewolves helping ladies across the street. Werewolf in a circus sideshow? But first, who are the friendly werewolf monsters? Dear Scary Stories NYC. I grew up thinking that werewolves were friendly to humans because the ones near us were reported to be. Friendly to humans, I mean. At least they seemed to do the bidding of our local town leaders. Most of us assumed the werewolves were humans, at least part of the time. I guess I did too until I saw them myself one night, and then I started to form my own theories. I'll get back to that part. My town was founded by a bunch of weirdos back when the US was still colonies. Nobody else was living out here back then except the natives, who my ancestors were able to get along peacefully with. Peacefully enough, at least. And their settlement became a real town, once the US became a real country. No, I'm not going to tell you what town I'm talking about, as what I've just revealed are secrets that I was not supposed to share. The fact that we're so weird about hiding our own past around here should clue you in that I'm not kidding when I say my town was founded by weirdos. They left Europe because they were probably going to be burned as witches if they didn't. Even to this day, I don't think most of their practices are things that they would want anyone outside of our tight-knit community to even find out about. In my opinion, they might be the reason the entire Midwest is so overrun with strange monsters who seem to disappear into thin air whenever anyone goes searching for them. I personally think that my ancestors broke open a hole that leads into and out of some kind of strange otherworld where creatures like the Dogman are the norm. There are others who agree with me now, but this was not the prevailing theory when I was a kid, and that was when most of the activity was going on and being discussed by us younger folk. None of us were let in on the secrets, and only a select few of the adults were groomed to be let into the inner mysteries of our location. I expected it to be revealed to me eventually, but when my time came, they passed me over for my younger sister. I took it as an insult, and they meant it as one too. They told me openly that I was an F-up, to use the clean version of the term. I wasn't any more of an F-up than some of those rich guys they chose to teach the secrets to. But I'm not rich. I'm also not a girl or pretty, while my younger sister was both, so she got to live out my fate. Now I'm surrounded by people with answers to questions that I just keep asking. I admit I'm bitter, and that's the only reason I'm sharing what I know here with you. I am so unhappy with them all that I really would tell you the name of this location if I didn't think they would kill me for doing it. There's a story that went around when I was a kid that we all assumed was true. Supposedly there was some real estate family that was looking to buy up our town and use it for some other purpose. It depended who was telling the story, like sometimes they wanted to put up a factory and other times it was about them demolishing the town to put a highway or railroad tracks through where people's houses were or something. At any rate, according to every version of the story, the main leader of this movement to buy up the town and kick everyone out died suddenly and mysteriously in a vicious and apparently random animal attack. Except in every version of the story I heard, it wasn't a pack of animals that killed that man. It was werewolves. Generally, it was thought that the leaders of our town were the werewolves who did that man in. But I suspect it was more a matter of them summoning the creatures to do their bidding. No matter how you interpret it though, this was a case of the town leaders circling the wagons and defending their way of life by causing the untimely demise of their enemy. I don't even know how to look that story up. Maybe one of you true crime people might know how to do that kind of research. I do believe the main underlying theme of the story though, and that is this. My town was founded a lot earlier than its official public history claims. It's not a randomly chosen spot. It's a power spot. And the men and women who run this town are willing to kill to keep what they've got. and to keep it a secret. I know that makes me sound like a raving madman, but it is what it is. During the pandemic, our town managed to avoid many of the lockdown measures, but we did it on the down low, not trying to draw attention to ourselves. We did attract some certain kinds of freedom lovers who took advantage of our hospitality, at least for a little while. There were nightly gatherings here of young hoodlum types from other towns that were in lockdown who would come over to our area. At first it was to eat at our restaurants and drink at our still open bars, and it was a mutually beneficial situation. But when they started to act like they owned the town, and they would do drag races and donuts in the main intersection of town while people were trying to sleep at night, that was when it was a problem. Our town's police department is like Barney Fife and a girl, so nobody listened to them when they told the crowd to disperse. It was starting to become our local culture that there would be drag races and so forth every single night. And I even took to going down to watch the action from a spot halfway up a nearby hill. That was how I came to see this next part with my own eyes, when it actually happened. There was some guy in a van doing spin-outs, and I kept thinking I was going to see him topple over. I mean, this van looked very top-heavy, and was not made to spin turns at the speed this guy was doing. I was certain that I was going to watch someone Minecraft themselves in front of my eyes that night. But then something even wilder started to take place. There were men gathering at the edges of our gathering. I know because I saw them walk out from behind me, past me, and toward the action down below. These men walked out of the farce from every direction surrounding this part of our town all at once. Now I will start to describe these men, who were obviously not ordinary. They appeared canine, but they walked like men, like soldiers. Clomp, 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 marching, forward, almost like robots, or automatons. Although I don't think they were that. I don't remember them wearing clothing, but they were very dark-furred, and I suppose they could have been wearing black clothing as well. What I was most fascinated by was that their footsteps seemed to produce bursts of light, sort of like fire, or quickly dispersing fire, maybe I should say. It was less with each step, as though they had walked out of a fiery pit, and their feet were just now cooling off. I turned around looking to see if there was a fire behind me anywhere, but all I saw was the dark hills surrounding our town at night. Some of the others there that night who noticed this fiery foot phenomenon stated later that it was proof that the werewolves emerged from hell itself, but I saw something that caused me to think differently. As I was looking behind me, I saw one of the men appear. It was like it walked through an invisible door, like it wasn't there, and then it appeared as if it were taking a step forward. And its feet were not there at first. They were invisible, while his entire body was on fire, and as the body fire died out into a dark werewolf silhouette, the feet came into form, appearing very hot, and on fire, or even made of fire. Now this didn't give me the impression I was watching something walk out of hell. It looked more to me like he was sort of walking into the teleporter from Captain Kirk's Star Trek. The feet seeming on fire. It also seemed like they were still being teleported from the previous location. Am I explaining that clearly enough? Like they would leave footprints that were on fire, but less so each step as they marched forward, as though their feet were cooling off. There was a lot of screaming down below, and I saw things that remind me now of Grand Theft Auto the game. Grown men being pulled out of their cars and thrown. The fiery-footed werewolf men were so strong, they were like superheroes, or supervillains, depending on your point of view. There was violence, but supposedly there were no deaths. The media covered it as a gang war, but this was no gang war. I witnessed it. It was more like watching the town's antibodies reject foreign matter, which had gotten into its bloodstream. It was like the spirit of the town itself drove those drag racers out, and brought quiet nights back to our burb. Now, I don't think that when men transform into werewolves that their feet catch on fire. I don't think we were seeing the town leaders in werewolf form, protecting our way of life. I do think those creatures were summoned, though, and I would expect it was the town leadership which did so. My sister knows the answer to this question, but she's sworn never to divulge it to me. I was the firstborn son of my generation, and my ancestors were among those who founded this town. My younger sister should not be told what I am not told. It's an obscenity against all my forefathers. Nevertheless, I'm as in the dark about all this as you. But the spiteful side of me hopes that now you know there's a secret out here, that one of you figure out what I haven't been able to. It seems unlikely, I'll admit, but I have a lot of revenge fantasies these days, that's all. But fantasies are what they'll remain, because one man can't compete against the entire lot of friendly werewolf monsters guarding and protecting this town. And I'm not bitter enough to want to wreck what generations have created just because I'm locked out of that history. I do think the werewolves, although terrifying and deadly, are mainly a force for good. I do still believe that there are times when violence is justifiable, and the werewolves seem concerned with protecting and preserving order, not allowing the town to descend into chaos. So while I may disagree strongly with some of the decisions made by our local leaders, I do think that these so-called werewolves, whatever they are and wherever they come from, are basically a force for the good.
If you want a coloring book full of monstrous delight, then give this a look. It'll give you a fright. Scary stories, coloring book, werewolf coloring book. And just to make your mind explode, it's a digital download. All it costs is $2.09, and then you will be feeling fine. Coloring monsters today, it's a coloring book, hooray. Okay, link is in the description.
Werewolf in a Circus Sideshow? Dear Scary Stories NYC. I was in the bathroom the other day when I suddenly remembered a story my uncle told me. Well, not a story exactly, but a memory, I guess you'd say. This was back in the 70s when I was a little monster kid. I loved creature features and I loved monster movies of all kinds. I remember it was a Saturday afternoon, and we had a monster movie on the TV. During a commercial break, I asked my dad which of the movie monsters could exist in real life, and which couldn't. He started off saying that werewolves weren't real, but my Uncle Sid, my dad's brother, interrupted to loudly disagree. Not only were werewolves real, but Uncle Sid claimed he had seen several of them. I remember my dad rolling his eyes and saying, if werewolves are real, give me an address so I can drive to where one exists. Uncle Sid said, oh, well, I haven't seen one for years, and my father said, name the location, I'll drive us there now. Sid said he couldn't name one, and I remember Dad jangling his car keys in his brother's face and saying, one last chance, Sid. Tell me where I can drive to see a werewolf, or stop telling my kid that the Wolfman is real. Dad was so angry we had to change the subject. But later, when Uncle Sid was alone, I asked him what he meant when he said he had seen more than one werewolf back in the day. He told me that not only were werewolves real, but there were different kinds of them. Well, I got my notebook and came back and took notes as Uncle Sid started telling me what he knew. Basically, there were two sorts. The ones with werewolf faces and the ones with dog heads. Both were covered in fur. Both had dog ears. But one kind was more human, with a head that was a mix between human and canine, while the other was literally a dog-headed man. The former could speak like a normal person, while the latter only made canine sounds. Both were men, though, according to Uncle Sid. They were men who looked like dogs, but they had human souls. They could think and they could decide between right and wrong. For instance, Uncle Sid told me that when people volunteered to fix an old widow's barn, that had partially fallen down? It was a wolf-headed dogman or werewolf from the traveling sideshow who came and shouldered most of the burden of the job himself. That man never spoke one word of English, but he learned sign language, and so we know he was intelligent. There was a circus sideshow strongman, who was a wolfman-faced furry man, according to Uncle Sid. Sid went backstage after a show one time to talk to the man, who he said was very self-confident and thought highly of himself, even though he was a dog-eared freakish monster that people gawked at. To the werewolf strongman, though, he thought people were amazed at his strength, which was impressive. But Uncle Sid told me the weightlifting bit was all just an excuse, so he could stare at a real-life half-human, half-animal, hybrid person. Uncle Sid sounded genuine when he told me about all this, but he would clam up about it when my father came around. He told me it wasn't worth fighting about, but it was true. Before I was born, Uncle Sid had lived for about a decade as a traveling salesman down south, before he gave up and got a job in a shoe store up near us here up north. That was when and where he claimed he saw these very unique individuals in traveling southern shows. I guess he was talking about the 1960s through the earlier 70s. Are there any traveling acts known of from back then which might be what my uncle was talking about? Maybe a weightlifter with extra body hair at least? I don't think he was lying. But if there were two different kinds of werewolves going around the South in those days, I also kind of feel like we would have heard more about it. Have you ever heard any stories similar to this, or do you know what historical traveling acts my Uncle Sid might have been referring to? If so, please leave what you know in the comments. Thanks.
Now he's a sticker, sticking to my book, sticking to my wall, everywhere I look, sticking where you like, with some exceptions, nothing to get is in that description.
I'm gonna call you Scary Sticker Man, yo.
I saw werewolves help old ladies across the street. Dear Scary Stories NYC. This is a story about how times have changed. These days you only hear about dogmen and werewolves when they scare people, or when they eat the neighbor's cat or whatever. You never hear stories about dogmen helping old ladies across the street anymore, do you? When I was a kid, I lived in a town that was run by werewolves. When I saw the scene I just described to you, they were in the middle of a sort of werewolves' rights period. It only lasted a couple or 3 months that winter. Then they went back to denying that they were werewolves and denying that they ever asserted a claim to werewolf rights. But this did happen. I can't unremember it. What seemed to have started it was that one of the werewolf mothers caught her kids watching The Howling or some other horror film that this mom felt portrayed werewolves in a bad light. She then persuaded her husband and the town council to start a movement within the local government to improve the image of werewolves. This also led to voluntary side projects such as the one in which 2 fully transformed werewolves helped old ladies across the streets during snowstorms. One old lady had to be hospitalized after she panicked when 2 large, hairy, dog-faced monsters started walking toward her in the snow one night. Personally, I'm amazed any of this went on for longer than a day or 2, but it was already being buried and covered over before the tulips bloomed that next spring. I remember that a lot of the old folks in town resented never being told before that they had voted for wolfmen, and the elections were a lot closer the next time. The werewolf sheriff even lost his gig and got replaced with a human for a while. The thing is, it was mainly the old people and me who were upset about the werewolf situation. The old folks passed on eventually, and I got buried under by the bullies who made sure I never got to live out my dreams. The efforts to deny that it ever happened were pretty thorough, and I doubt most people living in the town today are even aware that there was once a bit of a kerfuffle over werewolves of all things. But my sister knows the truth. The others I grew up with, they all know. And I should know too. But they won't share the information with you and me. Godzilla -1 might have been fun, but Godzilla Tim, we love him. Please join us in thanking our very special executive producer for this episode, the one and only Godzilla Tim Walker in Ireland. Bet you didn't even know there was a Godzilla in the UK. Well, this is the kindest and most generous of all Godzillas, and we wouldn't still be online if it weren't for Tim, and a few others like him. If you would like to be as loved and revered and honored as Godzilla Tim Walker in the UK, then listen to what this next little guy has to say. Oh, Hank. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.